Good morning, everyone. It is Robert Vincent, and we are now here on December 14th at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it is time for our DocuSign Workshop. So that means we're going to be talking about all things DocuSign for the next hour. It is Tech Tuesday. I am your host. That sounds so weird to say. I am Robert Vincent, and I am the Market Center Technical Trainer here at 463. If you don't know what that means, why are you watching this video? Seriously, what are you doing here? I am live on Facebook. I am live on YouTube over there at the kwtechtube.com, and that is our YouTube channel. And I am also live on Zoom right now, which is kwtechtv.com. I am broadcasting across the world right now, and we're going to be talking all things DocuSign Forms specifically. That's what we're going to be going over here today. As you can see on the screen behind me here, I've got, well, some of you can see it. Yep, the Zoom people can see it. The up top can see it there. Everybody can see that I am going to be talking about DocuSign Forms. And what that means is we're going to start off, as we always do, we're going to start off in Command, and we're going to work our way over to DocuSign, where we're going to be focusing on understanding all the cool things about forms. So hopefully you're going to be educated and get some really good stuff there. As I mentioned, if you'd like to join me in the Zoom room, it is kwtechtv.com, and we got some people starting to come on in there. Hey, Sharon, Sharon, not Shannon, Sharon, how are you doing this morning?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. We're coming towards the end of the year here, so it's getting pretty light. I noticed that people are like kind of not around. We had a few people here on the quick start this morning, but it's getting light towards the end of the year, so I expect the numbers to be falling off a cliff. But we're here for you now, and we're going to take care of you. So again, DocuSign Workshop. So with the focus of forms, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we get to DocuSign. You know, I always do this, even if it sounds a little bit redundant, but I always go the same way to explain to you guys how you should be creating your opportunities and your DocuSign rooms in Command. So I'll come over here in Command to one of my contacts that I have here. And while I do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off so that you can see the full screen on the Zoom without having me on top of that there. As a matter of fact, I'll do this. I'll do one better. On Zoom, I'm just going to show just this. That way you just see there, and I might as well turn that back on. Why not? I'll put that over here. There we go. That's better for Zoom. Okay, so I'll go to my contacts area, and as always, I go and find a client. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my standard demonstration client back up here, Jackie Astuto. And when I do this, I've got the client in the database, so I don't have to add it. If I didn't have the client, I would add the client. Then on the right-hand side, in the opportunities, under activities on the right-hand side, I will create a new opportunity. And that opportunity in this case is going to be a listing. So I'll quickly select the listing here, and I'm not going to use a co-seller because I want to talk about it in terms of just, simplicity today, although you could add a co-seller here. You always add the street address or the property address for the opportunity. If it's a listing, you add it now. If it's a buying opportunity, you add it when you have the buying opportunity. So this is Main Street in Epping. And we'll do New Hampshire here. There we go. So we always add this to the opportunity name because remember, the opportunity name that we create here becomes the name of the DocuSign room when we create that. Okay, commission rate of 3%. We're good to go. I'll leave the rest of this all the same here because we're not necessarily talking about opportunities in Command today. We're talking about DocuSign. So I won't go over all of those details. So here we are. I'm going to click on that listing that was newly created in the opportunities area for this contact. And of course, we're taken over to the details tab of our newly created opportunity. And you can see here, once again, there's that opportunity name up at the top that we just created. Here is our contact that we just we used for this opportunity. Of course, we have a primary phone number and we have our email address for this client. Now, what's missing and what's very important is that we need to add the listing, the MLS listing to the opportunity before we create this in DocuSign. Now, this always leads to a quick question. Again, this will be brief here, but the idea is, what if, Robert, I'm creating the opportunity before I've signed a deal or to be a representative for them, to be their agent, and so we haven't put it in the MLS yet? Well, that's no problem. This right here, this button is for when you have a property that's in the MLS. This button down here under the property, well, just to the top right of the property box in Command, this right here is for when you have a property address, but it's not in the MLS. This is just a Google address search. So when you choose this one here, you will not be loading any MLS data because in our scenario, there is no MLS data yet. Once you have the MLS data, you will come back to the select from listings and you will remove the address that's in there and you will add it from a real listing. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it in as if it's already been listed. It's already in the MLS. So I'll go ahead and search for this. And of course, I'll search all listings and there is that property. Now, I'm going a little quick in the beginning here because remember, this is a DocuSign class, but these little things that I'm giving you here, I always go over them just to give you that repetitive reminder that this is the information that creates a DocuSign room properly. You will never see a sample document if you do what I just did here. If you put a property address in on this side, or if you pull an MLS, you will never see the word sample across any of your documents. Okay, so now that we have that basic information there, we're going to go over to the Documents tab inside of the opportunity. And I got some good news. I'm very excited. This is actually the first DocuSign Workshop class that I've done where I'm going to show you something that we just recently changed in DocuSign to make your lives easier. So you as agents, we're always trying to figure out better ways to make it work faster, smoother, superhero-like for you guys. So one of those things is when you pick a checklist for what kind of documents you're going to need for this transaction. This checklist is going to tell you exactly what documents are going to be required. And in some cases, it'll give samples of those documents so you can see what they look like. In this case here, we created a listing listing opportunity. And we see here that it is a New Hampshire listing because we have a New Hampshire property. So when we pick the checklist type, we're looking for a New Hampshire listing. Side note, you will not see any buyer checklists here if you have created a listing opportunity and vice versa. If you create a buying opportunity, you will not see any listing checklists. So you always know whether you got the right checklist or not. So I'll go ahead and click on New Hampshire checklist and check it out.
Great.
And now you see here that in the checklist showing you the required documents, the document name, what kind of a document it is, and the status of that document, there is now this little icon here that says DS, stands for DocuSign. And what this means is that when we create the DocuSign room now, this template is going to automatically load these forms from DocuSign into your room so you don't have to go fishing for them. Because they are required forms, you're going to have to fill them out. So what we've done is we've taken the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 required forms out of 6 and made it so that when you create the DocuSign room, those blank forms are already there and they're partially filled out because of the information that you used when you created the opportunity, the contact name, the property address, if it's an MLS, all that goodness is going to be in those forms immediately when we create the opportunity. Now, you'll notice that the 5th one here, the required document for current deed, this doesn't exist in DocuSign. For obvious reasons, this is not going to be included. So you will have to get that deed and add that into your DocuSign room. Okay, so now that we know what the checklist is doing, and by the way, I wish that I had applause coming in here because this was something we've been working on for a while. It was a feature that was added 3 or 4 months ago, but we needed to make sure that it was going to work properly for us here, and it does, and so I'm very excited. So this is very, very, very cool.
Great.
Okay, so now that we know that we have the proper checklist, we know that we have the information filled out, we're going to start our transaction. Now, when you click this Start a Transaction button, Remember, we're creating the DocuSign room from command. We're not going to DocuSign. When we do this, it's going to link these two rooms together, and it's going to make it so that we can move the documents from DocuSign to command very, very easily. So I'll choose my DocuSign. Most of you will not have two options here. You will only have one option for what signing service you're going to use, whether it be DocuSign or .loop. So we're focusing on DocuSign. So I'll choose DocuSign. It's going to do its little whiz bang here. And in the background, it's going to say, okay, you need to log into DocuSign. I didn't touch anything there to make that happen. It just did it automatically. So I will log into DocuSign under my KW account. And we can see that those documents have been loaded in here and they are now in fact ready to go. So I'll refresh the page here. And you see that there are a couple things here that say sample, and we'll go over what's going on with that, and we'll go over why that might look like that, and we'll take a look at it. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go in our room, we're going to go back to the details tab. Notice that it dropped us off when we created this room. It dropped us off in the documents area of our brand new room. So at the top of the screen here, we have, we're in DocuSign rooms. We see that the tabs across the top, we could go back to the dashboard. We could go back and look at other rooms. We could look at documents that have come in via email to our inbox, and we can also go to look at documents here. But it took us to rooms, and it took us directly into the room that was immediately created for this transaction. So now we have not only the room has been created for us, but we're in that room and we're in the documents area of that room. So the different areas of that room are the details, the documents area, people that are in the room, any envelopes that are going to be or are out for signing, for signature, for e-signature, any messages about this room, and the history of this room. And, a lot of people don't really pay too much attention to these little tools here, but the history of this room, when you go here, it'll tell you when the room was created and what's happened since then, which means it will also show you documents that have been signed, when they were signed, and anything that you voided or anything like that. So this is actually really nice to have a complete history of this room. All right. So don't, you may not use it all the time, but don't ignore it if you have any questions. If you're like, hey, when did I do that? Go to the history, look at that. So once again, we get dumped off into the documents area here. And as I mentioned, those preloaded documents are already ready to go here. But before we send anything out, we always want to come back to the details area and just give it a once over. Because remember, this details area of our DocuSign room is always going to populate information on the various different fields of the various different documents that we load in here. So like, for example, the seller information here is going to load to all documents that require the seller information and so forth. So we look at the detail area here. We can see that the room is loaded up with the name, the created by. Here is our seller 1, and we only had one seller. So in seller 2 slot, we don't have anything. Here is our listing agent 1, which in this case is me as the agent. There is no second listing agent, and we don't have any buyer information in here. So we don't have any buyer 1 or buyer 2 or buyer agent 1 or buyer agent 2. So those are the different fields where we can add people who are generally going to be the signers of the document in some way or another. Doesn't mean all of them are going to be used for every transaction, but it does mean these are the places that people will go. We're going to call these roles. These are the roles of people within the transaction that we're working on. Seller 1 is the role of seller 1. So who is seller 1? Jackie Astuto. If there was a seller 2, the role of seller 2 would belong to whoever's in this slot. And I'm giving you this in terms of what these are so that later on when we're working with envelopes in the envelopes class, it will become apparent that when you say, I want to use pre-tagged roles, and you say, who is seller 1 and where do they sign? You just pull seller 1, seller 2, same thing. So these are very, very helpful to make sure your life is easy. All right. Just out of curiosity, does anybody have any question on these, the seller roles, the people that are in the room? Now, we're not talking about other individuals that we add, but generally speaking, the people that sign the documents.
No.
I have one question, and if you were not doing a seller and just doing a buyer, then it would just be the buyer's name down here,
Correct.
no listing agent, and you as the buyer agent, right?
That would be correct. Because of the type of transaction, Alice, when we created this transaction, we created it as a listing. So it automatically put these in these spots. If we had created it as a buying opportunity, then the buyer one and the buying agent one would have lit up. Those would have been the ones that it loaded in. Okay. All right, so you do see here that we have the address of the property. Now, this does not include the MLS information because all we did was we loaded the address. We did not load the MLS data. So this is showing us some stuff about this, but it's not the MLS. Okay, so now that we have the general information here on the Details tab, we can come back and we can look at this Documents tab here. Now, on the Documents tab, as I mentioned, we now have it so that you load up these preloaded documents. Let's start off with, we'll start off right at the very beginning here. And we'll look at the notice and consent of the audio and video recording. So when we load this in here, you can see that it loads up a copy of the document for us to be able to make some edits to. And when we say edits, you'll notice that it's got some fields that we can click in and fields that we can add information. So this is what this class is about, is understanding why this particular document looks the way it does and what can we do here, what should we do here, and how do we use this as a tool. So I'm going to close this up here and we're going to talk about what these are. Now, I've used the term documents. And we are, in fact, in the documents area of the program. So that kind of all makes sense. But these are not documents. So the distinction is this. These are forms that are built by different, the original forms are usually from the real estate the real estate associations or the state or wherever the official forms come from. Those forms are then added into a library here in DocuSign. Now, those forms, you can't change. You can't modify what's on the form. So when I look at this form here, by clicking on it in the documents area, I can't change the content of this area. That's the legalese of this form. And the areas that I am allowed to change, down here at the bottom, for example, these areas are designated as fields where either you as the agent or your signers are allowed to add information. Now you can see here that I am allowed, as the agent, I can put the name of, in this case, this is the buyer 1, and over here is the buyer 2. So we did make a listing agreement, but this here notice of consent and waiver of liability is for the buyer. So this, when somebody comes to look at the house. Now, Alice, you could probably address this in terms of the usage of this form better than I can because I'm not a real estate agent. But in my understanding, this form is given to buyers that are previewing the home to allow you to capture their signatures saying that they understand the notice of consent of waiver and liability for video and audio recording when they visit the property. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So because this is a buyer filled out form, it's still included in the listing packet, and you may end up having multiples of these because you may have multiple interested parties visiting the house. So you could effectively use this document multiple times, and that's what makes a form a form. So if this was here, the buyer was John Doe, okay? And John Doe called me up and said, I'm going to come by this afternoon or whenever, and I want to look at this house. You would come in here as the agent, and you would get John Doe's information into this thing, and you would put the address of this property here. And let's for a moment assume there's no second buyer. It's just going to be him walking through the home. You could then print this document out and have him wet sign it as he's walking in the door. Or you could send him this document via DocuSign and have him electronically sign it before he arrives. So again, without being an agent, I can't tell you when you should do this, but I'll ask you, Alice, when in this situation for a buyer who you are going to present this document to sign, do they typically sign it prior to them going to the property, or do they sign it at the property in your presence?
They generally, it depends, because sometimes you just meet people at the property. And so if you meet them at the property, you talk to them about what you are going to be looking at, and you have them sign this form. And if they're going to look at 10 properties that day, hopefully not, but maybe 5, then you can use this one form for all the properties that they look at that day. You don't do one of these for every property they see. What you do is this is just a general thing to say, these properties may have video equipment there. Mm-hmm. And are you okay with that? Mm-hmm. You also have a seller sign because and I'll go back in there and take a look, because the seller is supposed to disclose if there's video equipment. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times you'll see that light outside that shows that they have some sort of video, and people have put a black veil or cloth over it. Mm-hmm. So that they can say, no, we don't have any video equipment. But sometimes you sign it at the place. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you're meeting them in the office and you're going over all the forms, you ask them if they have any problems with going into homes that have video. And if they do, people can scratch out parts of this that they don't agree to, okay, and sign the rest of it.
Excellent.
Okay?
Very good. So with that knowledge here, you can print this document in a blank form, and by blank I mean you can take this out of here and you can not have it, so that you can have multiple copies of this in the same situation where you have people coming into a home and you want to get this signed. So you can do this either way, but the form aspect of this means that, again, you can't change any of the content here. You could strike through and all that, but that's something that's going to happen in the presence of people. The form itself, number one, you can only have one instance of any form in the document area of DocuSign at any given time. If you need to use that form multiple times, you can absolutely do that. You can say, fill this out with the one set of information, and then send an envelope out with that information for someone to sign, and then come back and fill out a different version of the exact same form, and then send it out to someone else. You can do that. So these forms are multi-fillable. So what that means is you can fill them out with different information multiple times, and you can send out envelopes to different people with the information in it to meet their needs. But you cannot have 2 copies of these forms in a room at any given time. And that always leads to the question of, well, what if I want the information in one of the forms that I've built or filled out? What if I want that information captured so that I know what was on it? Well, the answer to that question, it's one of the more pressing questions that people ask, is this. When you fill the form out and you send it using the envelope system in DocuSign, when you send it out for signature, that's when the information on the form gets locked in, the stuff that you've entered onto the form. You cannot manipulate it after they've signed it. So when it comes back to you, it's whatever was on the form, captured and stored, and it's given a certification. The actual form itself is then reusable because you do have a copy of what the original version looked like. And in fact, it can be signed as well. So one form of any type of form, one instance of any form per room. So this is what happens. The reason I say this and the reason I'm emphasizing it is because forms are not PDFs. They're not just documents. They're actually very tightly controlled objects. So when we use these, we're using the form to fill out the data and send it. Whereas a PDF, we can fill out the PDF different ways, multiple times, and send it out and shoot it around and do whatever we want. It's not as tightly controlled as a DocuSign form from the Realtors Association. Okay. So these forms that we're looking at right here, again, these these six forms that came into this room automatically for us. If we didn't have these, or if we needed to find additional forms, or if we just want to see where these forms came from, we can come up here and we can click the Add button at the top of the DocuSign room itself on the right-hand side. Now, there's choices of where you can add documents from, or forms, depending on which one you're doing. You'll notice that the first one is computer, so we can load stuff from our computer. Side note here, you don't need to go to Add and then go to Computer to add your documents if you want to bring them in from your computer. In the case of the computer option here, all you'd have to do is drag and drop a document on here. So for example, let me see if I've got something here that I can quickly put in here. Yeah, I do. Okay. So here is, I'm going to drag a document in, and I think you can see it when I move my mouse over the screen here. You see it says drag and drop your files to upload. The system is kind of like paying attention. It's in my browser, and it's like, I've got a little picture that I'm putting in here. So I'm just going to drop that image in there. And of course, it's an image that it won't take because it's a CSV. It's not a CSV. So let me grab one that I know will work. Okay, this one here. So I'll take this one in. So same thing. I drag that file into the window for DocuSign. It says drag and drop your files here, and it will immediately upload that file to this room and put it in this slot. So yeah, we can use the Add button and we can go to Computer and get our files that we want, or we can just drag them onto this window and they will go there. That's for documents that are from your computer though. So I'm going to right click this. I'm going to delete it. And there's a little bit of kind of a bonus tip for you there. Right click any document you want to remove and choose delete, and it will delete that document from your room. The next thing is add from DocuSign Forms. Now this is going to open up your library of DocuSign forms to choose from. This is not the same as adding something from Zip Forms. This is the DocuSign Forms library. And keep in mind, this is really, really important here. The reason that we have access to the DocuSign Forms library is because you're a Keller Williams agent, and Brittany, our licensing manager, has put your name into the DocuSign environment for Keller Williams, and she has given you permission to use the forms from this library. This is why it's so important for people that are thinking, oh, I want to keep my DocuSign separate from Command, or I want to have my own personal account. If that's the case, you will not have access to DocuSign Forms from the Keller Williams library. You just won't, because this is attached to your real estate number. It's attached to your NERDS number. It's attached to the corporation of Keller Williams. We are giving you access to these documents using this. So this is why it's so important to make sure that you set up DocuSign in Command, and I can help you do that. We want to make sure that your accounts are properly connected. When people call me and they say, Robert, I don't have access to my forms. If I come into here and I see that I do not see the KW logo up here, I know why. You've created your own personal DocuSign account and you can't get the forms. So we don't want you to do that. So now that we have that under our belt, to get to that library, we can click on DocuSign Forms. But I'm not going to. You're like, no, do it. No, I'm not going to. And here's why I'm not going to do it right away. because I want to talk about that access, what it includes. And are you familiar with NERDS numbers, NRDS? Put your hands up, NERDS numbers. Okay. So for those of you who do not know what a NERDS number is, it is a national real estate or realtor ID number or something like that.
Okay.
Alice, do you know what it actually stands for?
Real estate, and the,
Let's see.
anyway, it's your number that National Association of Real Estate assigns to you.
Correct.
And when you come on as a realtor, they give you that number. That's the National Real Estate Identification Number.
That's what I was looking for. Okay. So that NERDS number, if you ever wanted to find it, you can absolutely do that by just typing in find your NERDS ID in any web browser. As a matter of fact, I'll show you what that looks like here. I'll bring this up. As a matter of fact, I'll do it right here. This is what it looks like. When you go and you type in NERDS number into a browser, the first thing you're going to see is find your NERDS number. And when you click on that, it's going to say National Association of Realtors, find your NERDS ID. And all you have to give it, this is a public number, by the way. This is not like your, secret, super secret agent ID. This is enter your last name and an email, or enter last name and a real estate license number. In either case, you will find that public NERDS number. Now, what does that mean? This is basically an authentication system where you are assuring the system that you're eligible to receive these documents. Now, Brittany, as the licensing agent here,
And this is what your NERDS card looks like.
There it is.
Right here. See that?
There it is.
That's your NERDS card.
That's your NERDS. So that NERDS card, that has that ID number. And now what that does is it kind of authenticates you into the system. Now, it is not a required number to hit this add button and choose DocuSign Forms. And I don't want you guys to be walking away thinking, oh, Robert said that I have to have my NERDS number in there to have access to the forms. That is not the case, and that is not what I'm saying. But if you add your NERDS ID to DocuSign, then you are taking an extra step of authentication. You are taking that one extra step to make sure that you always have the latest documents, that you're always in the system. So there's nothing wrong with doing it. It's just a benefit. It's not a requirement. Okay? And so you can quote me on that. To add your NERDS number, if you want to add your NERDS number to the system, if you come up here to the very top right on your profile icon, if you click your picture, and on your picture, there's going to be a drop down. If you choose Preferences and you click on Preferences in DocuSign, it's going to take you to the Preferences area. And on the left-hand side is Contact Information, Notifications, Inbox Details, and Integrations. So if you click on Integrations here, you're going to see in the middle of the screen, there's a button that says Add Provider. Add Provider. Now, you'll notice that mine here says Company Forms. This is what Brittany, as the licensing person, is going to put you in touch with. But if you add Provider here, it's going to ask you, who are your forms providers? And you can click on Realtor or National Association of Realtors button here. Or if you're in California, the CAR. The Georgia's reasons is the GAR, and the Northwest Multiple Listing Sister Service is NMLS. But in this case, if you click on the Realtor here, it's going to say, okay, what is your NERDS ID? And if you don't know it, you can still find it by clicking on Find Your NERDS ID, and that's going to take you right back to this page to give you access to finding your NERDS ID. Once you do that, you'll put your last name in. And then you have to select your association. And as you can see here, that's a nice long list. And it's so long that it's actually, I have to go off the screen to find the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. So I'm actually hovered on it about 8 inches below the the window that you see. But that New Hampshire Association of Realtors, when you pick that, it will load it up into that association box here, and then you can validate your number. Now, of course, I don't have a NERDS number, so I'm going to leave that alone. But this extra step will just make sure that you have access to those forms. All right. So we're going to go back now to the room itself, and we're going to continue talking about how to add these forms in. So now that we have that information, we're going to click on Add, and we're going to go down here to DocuSign Forms. So we click on Forms, and it loads up our libraries. In our libraries, we can choose from the Keller Williams Coastal Lakes and Mountains Library, the Buyer Template folder, or the Listing Residential Template folder, or the major libraries of the KW 463, which is just our local market center, and then, of course, the NHAR documents. Now, you can search all of these documents by using the search bar up at the cross top here. Now, remember, one of the beautiful things about what we were talking about here is I've already loaded in the 5 required documents, so I don't have to worry about those. But if I come down through this list now and I look in, I'll take the NHAR list. Look what happens when I slide down the list of documents and I get to this one called NHAR Brokerage Relationship Disclosure Seller. On the right-hand side, it says that this document is in use, and I do not have the ability to put a checkbox in that slot to bring a second copy of this document form into this room. So that's that proof of once the form is in the room, you can use it multiple times and fill it out in multiple ways, but you can't bring 2 copies of that form into the room. Okay. Any other documents that do not have that in use, you can bring automatically into the room. So those are how we get our forms. And since I already have those forms, I'm going to cancel this dialog, and we're going to just come back here and look at the ones that we do need to fill out. One of the ones that's a primary one is the brokerage relationship form. So this one here, I'm going to click on this, and you're going to see that this one does have those sample words written across the top. And we need to find out why these say sample. When we open up the brokerage relationship form, you can see that you're probably very familiar with this form itself. Well, one of the things about this form is although it's loaded up the seller name and it's loaded up my name here, it's missing my license number. So I'm going to put in some numbers here to represent my license, which is not real. And I can put that information in here. But there's no slot for addresses or anything like that. So it did fill out some of the information. So this one here is actually good to go. And we can, when we save and close this here, we should find that the sample might even disappear off of this, but we should be good to go with this particular one. Well, when we send it, it'll disappear. So these forms are ready for us to be put into envelopes and to use. Now, as I mentioned, these forms themselves, we can't modify, and we can reuse them as we need. I'm going to talk about some organizational things inside this area, because one of the things that happens is when you're using forms in relationship to DocuSign and Command, we need to be able to get to the signed versions of forms. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go grab a copy of a form here really quick. Let's see if I can load that up. There we go. And I'm going to type in brokerage. And we're going to search for that. Here we go. Commissions, brokerage, relationship form. All right, fine. I'm just going to use... I'll use our advertising policy. Why not? Okay, so I'm not going to, I'm just going to drag a document in here from my desktop. It's a PDF. So I'm going to show you when I drag this document in here, it's going to load this PDF document up. And it's actually our advertising policy. So I want you to see the difference between the icons here. We have a form that's in blue, and we have a PDF that's now in red. Now, the PDF here is not a signed document, because this PDF is the original of that PDF that I dragged in here. The forms are not signed. What we're not seeing here is a signed document. So I'm going to quickly, and I'm going to use this one here. I'm going to use the brokerage relationship form. And you can see here that it's pretty much all filled out. I'm going to sign this document so you can see what a signed form looks like. So this one here has all of the general information already pre-filled. All I need to do is send this document out for signature. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the document area. I'm going to right click that document, and it brings up a list of document actions. Those document actions are for me to rename it, edit it, split it, apply form templates, and do a bunch of other stuffs here. One of the main things that I'm really interested in right now is creating an envelope. So what does that mean? What does create an envelope mean? Well, I want you to think back, and I know that we've all seen movies of like in the 50s and stuff where people that worked in office buildings sitting at desks would take documents and stuff them into a manila envelope. And as the mail cart would go by, they would drop those manila envelopes into a mail cart. And the mail guy would take them down to the mail room and sort them out as where they were supposed to go. Then they would go to where they need to be. They would get signed or looked at or whatever. Then somebody would stuff them back in an envelope and send them back to that office desk. That's exactly what's happening here. When you create an envelope, you're creating an electronic version of that delivery mechanism. So we're going to click on Create Envelope. And as with anything, you're going to need to give it some information so that it knows who you are, where it's going, and what's supposed to happen. So the first thing we do is we come up here and we see that there's some information about what this envelope is. So this envelope represents the brokerage relationship form. So brokerage relationship form to be signed. Okay, so now I put the brokerage relationship form to be signed. This is for me to know what's in the envelope. Then I come down here and I see that the brokerage relationship form has already been loaded into the room because that's the form that I right-clicked and said create envelope for. Next up is, where's this thing going? Who's this thing supposed to go to? Well, we need to add a recipient. And we already know who the seller is in this room by their pre-tagged role of seller. And that's who I want to send the document to. So I'm going to use pre-tagged roles. Now, today, I'm not going to go into any more detail about these three because we do have a class next week for the envelope process. So I'm just going to quickly say that we're going to use pre-tagged roles. And we know that seller one, the role of seller one, is currently being held by Jackie Astuto. That's it. So I'm just going to do the one signature right now, and I'm going to add Jackie as the pre-tagged role for seller one, and I've got an email for her. The default is that she needs to sign it. Good enough. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Now, again, we're going to go through this in much more detail next week, but for now, this is the simplest process to get this document ready for signature. So here is the document. There is the information. There's where Jackie is going to sign by her designation of the pre-tagged role. And all I have to do now is hit send. So when I send that document out, now in the background, you guys, I'm opening up my email client because I actually have a real email for this little client that I have in my little sample stuff. So I'm going to go and I'm going to sign that document. Okay. Give me a second here while this loads up. And so that thing is out. It says waiting for others. Notice as soon as we hit send, it took us back to the envelope. And it says you have a one envelope called brokerage relationship forms to be signed. And it's waiting for others as of 12/14. So I've got this thing out in the world and it's ready to go. Was there a question?
No.
Okay. So in the background here, I'm not going to bring it up on the screen, but in the background while we're talking here, I'm going to go ahead and sign that form. And that process, again, we'll cover next week. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is kind of static as I sign this thing in the background. Waiting, of course, for Google to load. But you don't see that, so you don't see how impatient I am. Okay. All right, so I'll click on preview that document and check it out. So now DocuSign is taking me in to sign this document. So, but I'm signing it right now as Jackie Astuto, even though I'm not doing a signing in person. You get the idea. So I'll continue and I'll go ahead and start the document signing process. There is the signature for Jackie, and I'll adopt it and sign it. It puts it in there and I can finish it. Tidbit for you, a little side note. A lot of people get confused on this screen. After your contact has signed the document, they will always be presented with this screen. And some people see this screen as part of the requirements to sign the document, and it is not the case. This is DocuSign soliciting your client to sign up for a free DocuSign account. That's all this screen is, and they can safely click on submit, they can safely click on no thanks, and it will bypass this registration screen, and they will not be asked to sign up. They can also click the download button at the top right of the screen, and they can do a PDF download and separate PDFs if there's multiple. And they can also print this document by clicking the print button. So they do not need to sign up, but they can download or print this. And when they click no thanks, or should they create an account here, submit, that will complete the transaction. Believe it or not, the transaction is not complete until they do either a submission of information to sign up or clicking no thanks. So I'll click no thanks. You've finished signing, and I can safely close this window. So now if I come back to my envelopes in DocuSign, when I refresh this page, and by the way, it might take a moment or two. So when you don't get click happy trying to refresh this, if somebody is like on the other end of the line, give it a minute, because that signature process has to complete itself before it comes back here as signed. So I gave it a moment, and now it's come back and it says completed. So this document has been signed, and I've got a little check mark saying that it's completed. Now, I could open the envelope and look at it, but I don't need to, because when it says completed here, it's already taken that form and put it back in the documents area. And here is the green signed version of this form, okay? The green signed version, and over to the left-hand side here is another red PDF, and it says that this is the certification for the brokerage relationship form. So these two documents were just added to my room, and they're in the documents area. So the whole purpose of me doing that was to demonstrate a new feature in Command, of all places. All right, so let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go back to Command, and we're going to look at this transaction in Command. And when I do, we see that down in the documents area for this transaction, there is a slot for the brokerage relationship form. Now, I haven't touched this since I created the transaction. And you'll notice that I can't click over here on the right to actually select the form to go in this slot. KW International down in Texas has made a little bit of a lapse in judgment as far as I'm concerned. They made it so that when you create a DocuSign room, you now need to, in addition to the DocuSign room, you need to specify where the documents are in that room. And there's, by default, only one place that they can go, and that is in the Room Docs folder. So take a look at what we see here. It says attach files from DocuSign from the working folder of Room Docs. Hold that thought. If I come back to the documents area in DocuSign, we can see here, and I'll collapse it so that you can see it. There is a folder called Room Docs, but it's the only folder, and by definition, everything is in there. And that's the default action. You didn't have to do anything to make that take place. Well, our brokerage relationship signed copy is in that folder. So to get it, we need to come back to Command, and we need to tell the system we want it from the Room Docs. Now, when we do that, though, this whole thing lights up, and we can now see that we can pick a drop down for any one of these. And here is the brokerage relationship form. And that's interesting. It's right there, the signed copy. Why didn't it show up? We'll refresh this. Brokerage relationship form. There it is. So now in Command, we can see under the brokerage relationship form, we can go over here and hit select, and we can go find it. But look what's going on here, you guys. The Room Docs has the advertising policy that I dropped in there manually. It also has the brokerage relationship form to be signed PDF, and it has the NHAR brokerage relationship seller signed. Okay, so it's actually got multiple documents in here. Some of them may not be what I'm looking for. So here's how I'm going to show you how to organize this structure for you. Back in the documents area, we have that folder for Room Docs, and we know that Command is looking in that folder for our documents. But how about we keep our lives simple? I'm going to go to the right-hand side in DocuSign under Actions to the right of the Add button, and I'm going to add a folder. And the folder that I'm going to add is Signed Docs. Now I have a folder called Signed Docs. And you remember how I also said that in there we also have these certification documents? Well, they're in my way too, frankly, because we don't need them, but we want to have them as backup. So I'm also going to create another folder called Certifications. Okay. Now, these three folders will show up in Command. I'll come back to Command and refresh the page. And I can see now that Room Docs, Signed Docs, and Certifications. I have three folders now that I can pull from. Why do I want three folders? Well, because in DocuSign, if I go back here, I'm going to take the Room Docs folder, and I'm going to take the Signed Brokerage Relationship Form, and I'm going to drag it into the Signed Document folder. And I'm also going to take the certification for that signed document, and I'm going to put it in Certifications. And I'm going to take this one here, that advertising policy, and I'm going to move it up to Certifications just to get it out of my way, because I'm not actually going to transfer that document to Command. So I just want to get it out of the way. Why? Because when I go back to Command now, and I'll refresh one more time, when I go to look for the brokerage relationship form under the Signed Docs folder, I'm only going to see documents that have been signed.
Okay, good.
So now I've cleaned it up, because you can see that this actually, the title is kind of like 3 lines for that one document. It doesn't give you a nice single line, easy to read. And it can be very confusing after you get a lot of documents in here. So using this organizational structure can make it really, really easy to find what you're looking for, because you've already separated them out inside of DocuSign into their correct folders. So Room Docs are going to be all the forms, Signed Docs are going to be the signed versions, Certifications and others, if you want, you can dump those over here to keep them out of the way. You obviously have access to them in not only DocuSign, you can indeed come over here and switch folders to get something from another folder if you need to, but you've organized yourself so that it's easier to work. Okay, questions on that stuff so far?
Yeah, I have, well, I don't know if it's questions or comments, but it just seems, a little cumbersome now that you have to go into the rooms and then create these folders to keep them out of the way.
I agree.
Instead of just being able to go into Command and click on the button and put them in like you used to.
I agree.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is back when you when the client signs, the clients know even less about this most of the time than we do. And So when they get something, they're calling me and saying, well, I had a guy the other day, he's like, stay on the phone with me while I try to sign this, because I can't get to this and I don't know how to do this. I'm like, fine. When you go in there and it says submit, that is what we've always used to submit the form and not to sign up for a new DocuSign.
Submit. Okay. Now, Alice, that submit was for the signer of the document, not for you as the agent. And what I was referring,
know. But I'm saying that the signer of the document thinks that they're supposed to click the submit
True.
once they sign and don't realize that they're signing up for, to add a new account to DocuSign.
That is a very big complaint that I have as well. To me, it's a little bit sneaky for a way for them to get another user signed up in DocuSign. And I don't appreciate it.
And there isn't anything we can do to move that out, because that's so confusing for clients. They can set up another page and say, if you would like to sign up, go to the next page or something. But when people are trying to sign and they're so nervous about these forms anyway, they would not think to press the button that says no thanks, because they think that they're supposed to be signing, and no thanks means I don't want to sign.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. I've talked to our Texas people about this. That is a DocuSign specific dialogue, and I don't know how much control, although KW is a pretty big entity in their world, and we should have a pretty strong voice in what things look like. I don't know how much control we have over that dialogue box. What I can tell you is it's entirely possible that I may start suggesting to people to have a little one sheet that you send along with the DocuSign documents that explains how to sign the documents. So maybe creating a simple one-page graphic or one-page little instruction sheet, to sign these documents, start here. Do this, this, and this to sign them. And then when you get to that final stage, click this no thanks button.
No thanks.
And then that will complete your signing process. I think that it wouldn't hurt to create something that's, branded to the KW. Even our market center, it would be nice to have this as an extra document so that people have instructions on how to sign them. Nothing stops us individually from doing it, but I think collectively it would be nice that we did that. So I may pursue something like that for us.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
I just send people a little email that says, when you finish, when you sign, press no thanks.
Yep.
And it'll send it forward.
Yep.
But it's, that's kind of, that's a pain in the neck for them and us to have to explain that.
Agreed. I totally agree.
People are signing off on sometimes millions of dollars. And we got some craziness there that tells them to say no thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I totally agree. And that's something that, that's kind of why I go over it with you guys, so that you understand what's happening. But I think that we can do better as an organization, especially at our market center. Why not start at home, right? And figure out a way to make it less stressful for our clients to sign our documents. So, Alice, it's an interesting point that we're kind of leaning towards this part of the conversation, because I've been feeling this way. And I know that now that it's really kind of in front of you, you look at this and go, wow, that's kind of a pain in the butt. I think that we should maybe take a look at this as a bigger group and say, is there some specific wording that we can use and all feel comfortable with about how to deal with the signing process as the consumer? Because we never really addressed that.
Right.
So,
and most of the time we don't see what they see.
Exactly.
So when they're calling us up and asking us, what do I do next? I'm like, hey, I had a hard enough time just getting it to you.
It's so true. It's so true. Now, on that note, we're going to wrap this up, but I will tell you this. One of the things that I talk about with every agent is sign some documents through DocuSign for yourself. Now, you saw me just do this. I did this with a fake, contact with a Gmail account that I had set up specifically for these purposes. So there's nothing stopping us individually as agents from going and saying, I'm going to act as the consumer and I'm going to experience what they experience so that when I get the phone call, I know what's going on, what's in front of them. And, take one of the hard documents, the purchase and sales or the disclosures. Take something that's a little bit more challenging than the brokerage relationship form and experience it as the signer, and send it to yourself,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well,
So
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So at 1:00 today, we are going to be going over Command 101, and it is the introduction to the database. This is for the newbies who have not seen the database, that have not experienced it before. If you want an overview, if you want to refresh what's in there, feel free to join me. That's at 1:00, and at 3:00 we have our advanced class, which is not really super advanced. It's kind of scary if you say it that way, but it's not. And we're going to be doing creating a Facebook ad. So come on in for 3:00 today for creating a Facebook ad. At 1:00 in about an hour, we're going to be doing going over the database as a whole. And that's it for now. Thank you very much for those of you who've joined me here in the Zoom room. We are on KW Tech Tube, which is our, let's see if I got my little screen here. I actually have this screen. Well, I'll put that up for you guys on Zoom as well, so that you can see this. What this is my contact information, robert.vincent@kwclm, which I actually need to change because it's now command@kwclm. Time with Robert to book time on my calendar. The Zoom room is where you're at right now, which is KW Tech TV. The YouTube streams are at kwtechtube.com. And of course, we're live streaming on Facebook under the Facebook groups KWCLM. That's it. Have a great hour. And for those of you that are coming back, I will see you guys in a little bit. Other than that, I think we're good to go. And that's it. Take care. We'll see you in a little bit, you guys.
See you at 3. Thank you. Bye-bye.